Alright. March of the Legion Exsanguinate Raider build overview. What's up, guys? Doing a quick just overview of
I'm not up to that just
the
yet.
Raider build that I've been playing for the last week or so. It's utilizing March of the Legion unique boots, which give you temporary versions of auras, but also only reserve the mana temporarily, which previously wasn't very useful because you had to spend all the mana that you were reserving to use it. But with the aura change this league, you can see I can have almost no mana available and continue reserving for auras, which means I can run 4 really strong auras in here and get a whole lot of value out of it. So I'm going to start with a quick map run, and then we'll go over what makes the build work, the kind of gear I've gone for and stuff like that. But as you'll see, for mapping in general, I have 4 auras that I'm keeping up. It's kind of like a second set of flasks, except they last like 20 seconds each. And then other than that, I've actually made a point to have about as little extra skills to worry about using as possible. So I basically just have a couple Vol skills and my main skill, which right now is Exsanguinate, and my movement skill. Just because I didn't want to have way too many things to micromanage while I was mapping. And Exsanguinate is linked to Chain. It helps a lot. It gives it actually some pretty good clear, I think. And it does decent single target as well. But you'll see once I get to the actual boss here, I'm going to actually switch to Reap to do my bossing, since Reap, especially with Awakened Spell Cascade, is just like a huge DPS game and actually shreds bosses really, really well. But as you can see, ultimatums are pretty easy. Mapping in general is pretty easy. It's not the tankiest build ever. I am playing on softcore with this character, but for softcore it's fine. It's still got pretty good Raider defense, tons of chance to evade attacks. I believe about 50 spell dodge. I don't know where it is on the page. It's probably down a bit. Oh, I'm on the offense tab.
You will fall to ruin.
Yeah, 55 spell dodge. And that's, I'm not using like a quartz flask or anything, so that's basically just always 55 spell dodge.
Keeping it interesting, I see.
But yeah. Just keeping the auras up. And even if the auras drop, if I like lose track of it and I let a couple of them drop for a little bit, it's not a big deal since they're 3 out of the 4 are just damage auras, so it just means I'm doing less damage temporarily. And then the Grace is also, it's really not the end of the world. But so here I'm going to swap out Exsanguinate for Reap and swap out Chain for Spell Cascade, Awakened Spell Cascade. And you'll see it'll make pretty quick work of the boss here. Not quite quick enough to get Hydra down before it ports away though. There's the boss. Not necessarily my cleanest kill of all time, but you get the idea. You get the idea. So yeah. So that's the build. We'll do a quick jump through all of everything that's making it tick and why I chose what I did. So starting with the gear, like I said, March of the Legion is here. It's like the core part of the build. I believe that March of the Legion, just as a kind of build defining unique, particularly with Raider, is really, really good, and it's very versatile. Because you could do, you know, an elemental spell build, you could do an attack build, you can do just about anything really. And Raider's really good for it because you might have noticed my auras aren't actually instant anymore. There's a slight cast time. But Raider with the super onslaught and everything gets like a lot of built-in cast speed even if you're an attack build. So it just helps that feel smooth even though you're not like instant on your auras. But yeah, mine has Haste, Hatred, Grace, and Zealotry in there. And the Haste and the Grace are both Vol versions for the Vol skills. And then the only other unique I'm using is Crown of the Tyrant, which I've picked because we're also doing Trinity with this setup, since Raider has some minus all res, and it's pretty easy to get like a split between cold and lightning damage through Hatred and like conversion and all that. Crown of the Tyrant has -10 all res on nearby enemies, whereas like an influence helmet would be, you know, -10 cold or minus lightning. It also has a ton of life and some flat damage, which I use to get extra flat damage to help even more balance my Trinity support. And the fact that it only has one socket, which is the big drawback of the item, isn't that big of a deal, because again, I'm trying to avoid having too many other utility skills to use, since I'm already managing the 4 auras. I don't want to have to be juggling much more than that. So like the downside ends up not even being much of a downside. And I just have a vortex in here on left click because I couldn't think of anything else to put there, just for like a nice instant skill that gets a little bit of chilled ground around while I'm, you know, fighting or mapping or whatever. But then the weapons, I have one influenced weapon, which is pretty necessary to get the last bit of fizz conversion in the build. This one has fizz to fire. I believe with my setup, fizz to fire or fizz to lightning would have been fine, but not fizz to cold, because then I would end up with too much cold. And it's also got +1 fizz spells and some multi-modded stuff. The other weapon is just a scepter that I bought with high damage, +1 fizz again, and some crit chance and all that. And they're both qualityed for LE damage per quality. Amulet is basically just life, crit multi, resistances. I put damage while leeching. I don't know exactly how often this is up. I have it on the gloves as well, but since my skills cost life, which is also pretty important with this setup because I wouldn't be able to maintain a really spammy mana cost skill, but since they cost life and I have life leech, the damage while leeching should be up pretty often. And then this ring is just like a DPS booster ring. I took a Crusader and a Warlord ring and Awakener orbed them. Got one with a decent life roll and then just crafted even more damage. The other ring is Assassin's Mark, which is really good for the single target. Obviously, Assassin's Mark is very strong. Happened to luck into life gain on hit with spells, which has at least in ultimatums, the life on hit with spells is really nice. I don't really notice it much elsewhere. It's definitely not like needed or anything. But this one's mostly here for the Assassin's Mark on hit. The gloves are mostly just life and res, and then they have the other bit of missing conversion, which this doesn't need to be this like 30% unveiled version. You could just do the benchcraft and it would be fine. I just happened to get that when I was putting a random unveil mod on it, which ended up letting me do the damage while leeching craft, which was nice. Belt's mostly just life and res as well. I did get some spell damage during Flask Effect, just a little bit here and there where I could squeeze some damage out. And the body armor, the main things looking for is the Frenzy Charge on hit, and then, you know, decent life, some resists, ideally, and an open prefix for spell dodge. This one also has a little bit of fizz taken as cold. It's not the top tier of fizz taken as cold. It definitely needs to be divined, but the spell dodge is really good. And then the Frenzy Charge on hit is good for damage, obviously. The flasks are kind of whatever, pretty basic stuff. Taste of Hate, since we're fizz conversion, is good. Bottled Faith is Bottled Faith. Diamond Flask Quicksilver. The Life Flask, you technically, at least on softcore, well, this whole build's softcore. There's probably a hardcore setup that you could do for this, the kind of concept overall, but this setup in particular is very much a softcore one. You could probably honestly drop this for another damage flask, like an Aziri's Promise or something, if you really, really don't care about defense and just want to squeeze as much damage as possible. You probably could do that. Oh, and also the let's see, the jewel in my belt is some more flat lightning, because more flat lightning is good. A little bit of crit multi, a little bit of life. But that's all the gear. Real quick through the gems. The mapping setup is Exsanguinate with Chain. Then we've got Awakened Spell Echo, Controlled Destruction. My Controlled Destruction was an Empower gem for a while, and then even before that you could have like Hypothermia. It's pretty good. But Awakened Controlled I just got recently. Fizz to Lightning and Trinity. These are pretty mandatory because Trinity is just insanely good, and you need Fizz to Lightning to get the rest of the conversion and to balance for Trinity. Then in the weapon, I've got my Herald of Ice, which is linked to Enlighten and Blind. The Blind is here because I just didn't have anything else to put, really. And Blind doesn't have any mana multiplier, which is good. Especially because once you see the passive tree, there's some issues with mana reservation. Other weapon has the second one, Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, and the gloves have my cast and damage taken, Immortal Call, and also a level 1 Blade Blast just for the unnerve proc, because why not? Why not? And then the ones in the boots I went over, the auras, the haste, hatred, grace, zealotry. Now for the passive tree, the raider stuff, I did the onslaught and the phasing. I mean, for me, that's pretty much the way to play raider. Like, some cases, if you really wanted to go glass cannon, you could do the frenzy charge stuff if you're like an attack build, maybe. But really, this is what makes raider just so strong right now, so definitely going for those. But then the rest, you'll see life, crit damage, normal, phase acro, wind dancer. But then over here towards Scion, this is another reason why raider's so good with this, because we're pretty close to this, is Supreme Ego is actually a huge part of this, even though we're running 4 auras and then some skill effect duration to make the auras last longer. But the thing about Supreme Ego, we get 50% more aura effect at the cost of 50% more reservation, and you can only have 1 permanent aura on you. The thing is, these auras aren't permanent anymore, so I can still have all 4, and the 50% aura effect is not restricted to being permanent auras. So we just basically get 50% more aura effect at the cost of 50% more reservation, even though we're running a ton of auras. Which actually, you can see, makes it to where, like, when I temporarily press these, I'm almost out of mana to reserve, even with only running a Herald of Ice, even with it having Enlighten, and even with some, like, reduced reservation on the tree here and there. But overall, the boost from that, the more aura effect is huge. Then over here we have the cluster jewel setup, which I've got an elemental large cluster. Aura effect node is nice. I think Sadist is actually a better node than this, but when I was first getting this build going, I don't think I was able to afford one. I don't remember why exactly I didn't have one, but I believe it's actually better than this. Prismatic Heart's really good to just get some res, and then Doriani's Lesson for the leech. And then both the mediums are aura effect mediums with First Among Equals and Purposeful Harbinger. Purposeful Harbinger is just because it has like the highest aura effect that we can get from a single node at 8%, even though we only have 1 Herald. But since we only have 1 Herald, we're not getting up to that 40% cap, so we can use the node twice. And then First Among Equals is very important because it has increased skill effect duration, which again makes the auras last longer. So these are really big. There's actually a setup you could do that I do want to switch to eventually, where I would grab this socket and do a whole second cluster jewel setup. I think it would also be an elemental large, and then it would definitely be these two, the same mediums, and then that would be another 80 or 40% rather skill effect duration, which would let me drop these 4 points, which I need to drop to be able to get it. And then I think I would drop everything here, so I'd lose some life, but it would gain a ton of damage. But I think I still need another passive point to even be able to do it. This stuff, I don't think I need this strength node. I spec'd it because I was testing something that needed more strength, so I should be able to actually unspec that. Let me double check. The int node I do need. Otherwise, if you get like pretty much any int on a piece of gear somewhere, you won't need this. But I do need it because I didn't get any. And then the rest is just, again, jewel sockets, crit, life, and the aura stuff that we're able to get. Pretty straightforward, other than like the Supreme Ego thing. And then all the jewels are mostly rares with just damage and, you know, whatever life I could get. I have one that's a Corrupt Blood rare, and I have a Watcher's Eye with Hatred crit chance and Zealotry Ellie Pen. If you're on like a lower budget, you would just pick, you know, one of the two. Hatred's the stronger solo mod of the two, but it's also the more expensive. But those are the 2 mods you want, and then if you were able to get some sort of third mod one, I mean, you just get whatever you can, honestly, because at that point you're looking at like a really crazy high-end jewel. But I think that does it for the tree. The Pantheon I like to run is Solaris, just in general really good for defense value. And then I'm running Shikari at the moment because I don't actually have very good chaos res. I'm at -20. which is probably the worst chaos res I've had on a character in a very long time. Alternatively, you could run Soul of Ralakesh, but I'm not too worried about bleeds. And I don't even know what else you would run, but the cast one's really good, so I don't think you need to do too much more than that. But I think that covers the whole build. The one thing to note, I would say, is to get it started, to get the boots, the March of the Legion going, and like some decent items. I think I started on Softcore Trade Ultimatum with about 35-ish exalts into the character, and it was really smooth. It was like really, really strong for when I started. I mean, it was a 35 exalt build for like white and yellow maps. I was cruising, and granted, out of those 35 exalts, I think 12 or 13 were just the Bottled Faith. I think probably 15 to 20x is a pretty good starting point. Like, you don't even need things like an Assassin's Mark ring to get started. What you need is the boot. You probably want a conversion weapon. Crown of the Tyrant, probably, just so good for the value. And like either a 6-link chest or a frenzy charge on hit chest, and then just decent items elsewhere to get like your other damage and whatever else. Yeah, that's the build. It's really fun.
I'm not up to that just yet.
You can also play this particular setup with basically any physical spell you want. I was using Ethereal Knives for a bit, and it's also really good. Like, you can do EK Nova. The only thing is you have to use life tap support with EK because the mana cost just isn't sustainable with this current setup. But like, it maps really well. I really like Exsanguinate. It's a really solid skill, so I've just been drawn back to it again and again this league. That's all I got. It's a cool build. You should try it out, or not. Thanks for watching. See you.